The earth did not belong to the peaceful or the timid. In a clearing bordered by ancient ferns, two massive bulls stand motionless, their breathing heavy and synchronized. This is not a hunt, and there is no predator in sight. This is something far older and more intimate. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by a sound like a mountain cracking in half. The two creatures charge, their skulls colliding with a force that would liquefy a modern mammal. Dust rises in a choking cloud as they lock together, straining every muscle to prove a singular point. In the prehistoric world, reproduction was never a simple matter of attraction. It was a brutal, bone-breaking battle for the right to exist in the next generation. What we perceive today as extreme violence was, for millions of years, the standard operating procedure for life on Earth. Nature does not value comfort, nor does it prioritize the safety of the individual. It cares only for the strength of the bloodline. Before we dive deep into this lost world of prehistoric shadows and ironclad instincts, take a moment to join our journey through time. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so you never miss a glimpse into the raw reality of the natural world. To understand these ancient skirmishes, we must look at the world through the eyes of a detective. We cannot watch a Tyrannosaurus defend its territory or a Triceratops challenge a rival in person. Instead, we must learn to read the silent testimony of the dead. Paleontology is no longer just about finding the largest bones. It is about reconstructing the final, frantic moments of a life lived at the edge of survival. Scientists rely on four critical clues to bridge the gap between cold stone and living behavior. The first is the presence of healed injuries. When we find a skull with a massive puncture wound that shows signs of bone regrowth, we know the animal survived the encounter. This tells us the wound was not from a killing blow by a predator, but likely a ritualized strike from a member of its own kind. The second clue lies in repeated patterns. If dozens of fossils from the same species show the exact same type of damage in the exact same location, it is no longer an accident. It is a signature of a specific fighting style. We also look at the physical architecture of the animals themselves. We see structures that serve no purpose for eating or walking, but are perfectly designed to deliver or absorb a crushing impact. Finally, we look deep inside the bone itself. Microscopic analysis reveals how the bone grew and where it was reinforced. Stress markers in the microstructure act like a biological record of every high-impact collision the animal ever endured. Together, these pieces of evidence transform static skeletons into a vivid theater of prehistoric aggression. Consider the Pachycephalosaurus, the living battering ram of the late Cretaceous. These dinosaurs carried a dome of solid bone atop their heads that could be up to 10 inches thick. For decades, researchers wondered if these domes were merely for show, perhaps covered in bright colors to attract a mate. However, the internal structure of the bone tells a different story of high-energy impact and survival. Injury data reveals a high frequency of head trauma in adult individuals, while juveniles remain largely unscathed. This suggests that the thick skull was not a defensive tool against predators, but a weapon for ritualized combat. As these animals reached sexual maturity, the drive to dominate became a physical necessity. They would lower their heads and charge, turning their entire bodies into a projectile. The exact mechanics of their fights are still debated by experts today. Some believe they slammed their heads directly into one another, while others suggest they aimed for the flanks to knock their opponents off balance. Regardless of the technique, the intent remains undeniable. This was a physical competition where the stakes were nothing less than the future of the species. While some used their heads as hammers, others turned them into lances. The horned dinosaurs, or ceratopsians, are perhaps the most iconic warriors of the ancient world. With their massive frills and sharp brow horns, they look like biological tanks designed for war. For a long time, we assumed these weapons were meant for fending off hungry carnivores like the Tyrannosaurus. But the fossils tell a more nuanced story of internal conflict. When we examine the frills of these massive herbivores, we find circular holes and deep gouges that perfectly match the spacing of the horns from their own species. These were not random injuries. They were the result of structured head-on clashes where rivals locked horns in a test of raw power. The frill acted as both a shield and a billboard. It protected the vital neck area from a fatal thrust while also signaling the animal's health and vigor. To survive a horn thrust to the face and live to fight another day requires an incredible level of resilience. This was evolution's way of filtering out the weak, ensuring that only the most durable bulls could pass on their genetic legacy. Not all prehistoric weapons were located at the front of the body. In the world of the armored dinosaurs, the most devastating power lay in the tail. The Ankylosaurs were the ultimate defenders, covered in bony plates from head to toe. But at the end of their stiffened tails sat a massive club of solid bone, capable of shattering the legs of any predator. However, researchers have discovered that these clubs were frequently used against other ankylosaurs. Damage patterns on the armored flanks of these animals show repeated impacts from the side. These strikes were delivered with deliberate control, aimed at the areas where the armor was thickest. This suggests a highly ritualized form of combat, where the goal was to assert dominance without necessarily causing a fatal injury. Imagine the sound of those impacts echoing through a prehistoric forest. Two armored giants circling one another, swinging their multi-pound clubs with the force of a wrecking ball. This was a slow-motion dance of destruction, a calculated display of strength where the loser would eventually retreat, battered but alive. It was a system that balanced the need for competition with the need for the species to survive. Even the kings of the prehistoric world, the great carnivores, were not exempt from this culture of violence. We often think of predators as efficient killing machines that only fight for food. But for a tyrannosaur, the greatest threat often came from another tyrannosaur. Adult specimens frequently show widespread facial bite marks, scars that are conspicuously absent in younger individuals. These scars suggest a ritualized behavior known as face biting. Instead of fighting to the death, these massive predators would engage in a terrifying display of biting and holding. They would clamp their jaws onto an opponent's snout, asserting their dominance through pain and physical control. It was a high-stakes game of chicken, played with teeth the size of bananas. The fact that so many of these animals survived these encounters is a testament to their incredible healing abilities. It also shows that even the most violent creatures on Earth understood the value of restraint. A dead rival cannot acknowledge your dominance, and a wounded victor is vulnerable to others. These bites were messages, written in scars, that established the hierarchy of the territory. We must ask ourselves why evolution would allow such dangerous behaviors to persist. Why would a species risk its most healthy members in brutal combat? The answer is as cold as the logic of the universe itself. These systems persisted because they were effective. In the natural world, the only metric of success is the number of offspring you leave behind.
How big the T-Rex is.
They are incredible, aren't they?
Wow.
The pressure of sexual selection created a simple winner-takes-all scenario. The individuals who were strongest, fastest, and most resilient were the ones who reproduced. Their offspring inherited those same traits, creating a feedback loop that pushed physical limits to the extreme. If a trait improved your chances of winning a fight, even by a small margin, it was worth the risk of injury. This relentless drive for success explains why we see such bizarre and specialized anatomy in the fossil record. Every horn, every dome, and every club was a response to the pressure of competition. Evolution does not favor the most elegant or the most peaceful. It favors the survivor who can stand their ground when the world demands a display of power. However, the prehistoric world was not entirely defined by blood and bone. Some species discovered that they could achieve the same results through the power of performance. We have found evidence of display arenas, known as leks, where dinosaurs would gather to show off. Scratched ground patterns and traces of elaborate feathers suggest that for some, the dance was more important than the duel. In these species, the competition moved from the physical to the visual. Success was determined by the brightness of a crest, the complexity of a song, or the grace of a ritualized movement. This is a strategy we see in many modern birds, the direct descendants of the dinosaurs. It proves that there is more than one way to win the game of life. While display is certainly safer than combat, it requires a different kind of energy. The animal must invest heavily in ornaments that might actually make it more visible to predators. Whether through violence or through beauty, the goal remained the same. Every species was looking for a way to signal its quality to the world, proving that it was worthy of continuing the chain of life. Looking back, we see two distinct evolutionary paths emerging from the prehistoric mist. One path led to violent combat with real, often permanent consequences. The other led to non-violent displays based on signaling and psychology. Both strategies were successful enough to last for millions of years, but one was undeniably more dangerous, leaving its marks etched forever in the fossil record. The story of prehistoric courtship is a reminder that nature is not a moral entity. It does not reward kindness or punish aggression. It only rewards what works. The brutality of the past was the forge in which the ancestors of modern life were shaped. It was a world of hard edges and high stakes, where every heartbeat had to be earned. For over 150 million years, these systems thrived, creating a complex social fabric that we are only just beginning to understand. Then, in a geological instant, a sudden extinction event reset the clock. The giants fell, their weapons became useless, and the world grew quiet. But even in death, they continue to teach us about the fundamental laws of existence. As we look at these ancient scars and shattered bones, we can find a lesson for our own lives. We often struggle with our own instincts, the internal drives for competition and status that we inherited from a much older world. But unlike the dinosaurs, we have the capacity to choose our arena. We can choose how we compete and what we value. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the brutal reality of the prehistoric world, please give this video a like. Your support helps us continue to uncover the secrets of the past and bring them to light. Don't forget to subscribe and join our community of curious minds as we explore the wonders of the natural world together.